Hi everyone, my name is Marta Martín Gilete, and today I will be presenting the topic Metaphors, Minds, and Meaning, Applying Cognitive Linguistics in the EL2 Classroom. In this presentation, I will share the key findings from my doctoral research project, Topic-Based Teaching of Metaphor in an EFL Syllabus, a longitudinal study of achievement at B2 level. I will offer an overview of the complete study, focusing on the benefits and limitations of CL-inspired instruction. As you can see, this is the outline of my presentation. And now let's start. It is well known that metaphor is a fundamental aspect of language use and thought. Conceptual metaphors help us understand and experience more abstract or complex concepts by mapping them onto more physical, familiar experiences. For example, in English, we view the mind in terms of a container, with thoughts being stored or going in and out. Underlying conceptual metaphors are reflected in language by linguistic metaphors, often conventional and codified in dictionaries, including vocabulary from different word classes. Why research metaphor in learner discourse? Well, standardized metaphor identification procedures such as MIP and MIPBO have established that metaphor is ubiquitous in both L1 and L2 language use across various proficiency levels, L1 backgrounds, ages, learning stages, and educational contexts beyond English. Consequently, metaphor has an important role in L2 learning, affecting both input and output discourse in instructional and assessment contexts. Metaphor is part of L2 speakers' communicative competence. Why? Well, mastering metaphorical meanings in L2 learning can serve as a vocabulary builder and can enhance cultural awareness. However, L2 learners encounter challenges in effectively using conventional metaphorical language in L2 speech and writing. In this way, teachers should support learners in mastering metaphorical meanings within the lexicogrammatical structure of the L2, facilitating their achievement of target proficiency levels. Recent research has identified the challenges L2 learners face in the writing at the B2 level, especially in producing metaphors when dealing with abstract topics. This situation often leads them to experiment with language, resulting in unconventional uses. However, despite these findings, we know little about where L2 learners, especially at B2 level, can find support to enhance their use of metaphor in English. Applied cognitive linguists have explored how to teach and learn metaphors in L2 classroom, focusing on different aspects. As you can see, let's start with the teaching learning process. And much of the research has explored CL-oriented teaching methods, and especially regarding semantic and or etymological elaboration. Also, regarding the type of language of metaphorical language research, metaphor research has focused on specific isolated aspects of language, and especially regarding idioms and phrasal verbs. Regarding timing of studies, the dominant trend is toward short-term studies, as you can see. So there's need for sustained efforts in awareness raising L2 classroom practice. Regarding the participant profiles, most studies have explored university-age students, B1 level participants, for example, and also most attention has been paid to Dutch as the L1 background, and they had been research analyzed in small-scale groups. And these experiments have include one control and one experimental group, okay? And sometimes the teaching intervention lack of parity between both groups. Also, regarding now a different focus, the outcomes of instruction, much of the research has focused on comprehension and retention rather than production, for example. And regarding production, most research has explored written discourse rather than oral discourse. And most research has focused on elicitation methods rather than naturalistic data regarding tasting learning games. And finally, regarding materials and assessment practices, there is limited availability of CL-oriented teaching materials. There's little support for enhancing metaphor awareness in mainstream ELT materials. Incidental exercises and lack of guidance for L2 instructors. So there's a scarcity of clear guidance for L2 instructors on teaching metaphor at lower levels in L2 competence descriptors such as the Common European Framework of Reference, and there's limited knowledge of how metaphorical language is evaluated in standardized L2 assessment. To date, to the best of my knowledge, no detailed investigation has been conducted that includes both the pedagogical process and the outcomes of instruction concerning L2 metaphor production in real-world context. In my view, such a study would be useful to shed light on formal assessment practices and refine teaching methods, especially regarding lexicogrammatical patterns, which are crucial for achieving native-like accuracy in standard L2 competence exams. To address this gap, I designed a longitudinal study to explore the effects of integrating CL-oriented methods into a topic-based EFL syllabus linked to the B2 level descriptors to support learners' metaphor production as their language skills developed during B2 training. And here you can see these are the 3 key research questions of the study. I carried out the quasi-experimental study at an English language school in Cáceres, Spain, where I was one of the EFL teachers responsible for B2 training at the time of the investigation. The study involved 40 Spanish learners of English who were all preparing for the B2 first for schools qualification. I divided these high school students into 2 homogeneous groups, control and experimental, with 20 students in each. I led the study in collaboration with 2 other EFL instructors and the language school. Being trained in Cognitive Linguistics, I taught the experimental group, while a colleague who was not familiar with applications of CL2 instruction taught the control group. Additionally, to ensure unbiased marking, the administrator of the language school, a native certified examiner, assessed the participants' speaking and writing performance. I employed 3 different instruments to carry out the study. First, I used 2 official Cambridge B2 level mock exams as tools for pre-testing and delayed post-testing to evaluate metaphor performance and English language performance. Additionally, the topic-based goal-oriented textbook already used in class for B2 training formed the basis of the teaching treatment. In my study, metaphor-mediated instruction refers to an instructional approach to explicit metaphor instruction that incorporates metaphor awareness into the EFL syllabus through distributed learning of metaphorical language using various CL-oriented methods. It aimed to enhance learners' organic conventional metaphor use, that is, vocabulary depth, in speech and writing as their L2 language skills developed, supported by topic-based input from the textbook, specifically aligned with the Common European Framework reference descriptors and following a standard communicative approach. In metaphor-mediated instruction, I acted as a mediator, supporting L2 learners to enhance their ability to notice metaphors and understand the motivation behind the metaphorical meaning of vocabulary from regular classroom activities. In turn, this approach also aimed to develop L2 learners' autonomy when dealing with metaphorical language beyond the L2 classroom, for example, in their B2 First for Schools exam. However, the control group engaged in vocabulary activities from the same textbook following the standard communicative approach, but with no opportunities for in-depth learning of vocabulary with CL-inspired activities. I initially designed the longitudinal study to run for 6 months from November 2019 to May 2020. However, the unexpected outbreak of COVID-19 and subsequent nationwide lockdown disrupted the research schedule. As a result, the teaching treatment concluded 6 weeks earlier than planned, and I have to move forward with the post-test due to the extended home confinement lasting nearly 3 months. Consequently, the study lasted for 5 months, and I adapted the teaching treatment and post-testing phases to address the impact of COVID-19 during the study period. The originally planned 21-week teaching treatment was shortened to 15 weeks. In the following 5 weeks leading up to the post-test, all participants were taught online, focusing exclusively on intensive examination training, and the online sessions were coordinated with the control group teacher, and metaphor awareness was only introduced for lexicogrammar elements in the practice test where possible. As a result, the post-test took place online via Zoom in April 2020, concluding 6 weeks after the teaching treatment and just over 5 months from the pre-test. Data collected from the pre-test and post-test included participants' proficiency scores to evaluate their achievement at B2 level, and text collected from spoken and written outputs from the B2 speaking and writing test, covering broad topics that were relevant to the interests and experience of participants, taking into account how topics can affect the use of metaphors. For comparison purposes, the analysis only included exam parts in the speaking and writing test that shared similar task performance and were completed by all participants, and also taking into account how genre and language mode can also affect the use of metaphors. I used an adapted version of the voice transcription procedure to transcribe non-native spoken English that was audio recorded. I employ a slightly adapted version of the well-known MIPU method to identify metaphor use in the oral and written outputs of L2 learners of English. The minor adjustments made to the standard procedure addressed the language-specific issues I encountered while applying its protocols across the 4 stages of analysis. Troubleshooting methods were tailored to suit the lexicogrammatical approach I adopted in the study to analyze L2 discourse, as well as the heterogeneity of L2 language use, including learner errors and non-native-like phraseology, and reliability testing of the adapted version demonstrating consistent application of the analytical criteria by 3 different analysts and the principal researcher across time. Data treatment included both quantitative and qualitative analysis to address the 3 research questions. I used non-parametric tests for statistical analysis using R to ensure the validity of the results, as the sample size were less than 30. And considering the importance of topic similarity in demonstrating L2 competence in high-stakes EXAL exams, I conducted a detailed exploratory analysis to better understand participants' vocabulary depth in oral and written discourse at B2 level. Now, let's focus on the results. So here you can see regarding metaphor performance at B2 level. Regarding experimental groups, a statistically significant increase in metaphor use was found, especially in writing, leading to consistent positive progress. In the case of control group, a statistically significant decrease in metaphor use in spoken discourse, despite some progress in writing, resulting in imbalanced evolution. And when comparing both groups, no significant differences between the groups were found in both speech and writing, suggesting other factors may have influenced their development beyond the CL-oriented treatment. Now, focusing on metaphor performance at B2 level, but this time the type of metaphorical language used. Regarding experimental groups, significant evolution in using open and closed class metaphors in written discourse was found, and significant decrease in closed class metaphors in oral discourse was found. Now, focusing on control groups, a significant decrease in closed class metaphors was found in oral discourse. Now, when comparing both groups, significant differences in open class metaphor using speech with the experimental group showing more progress, and no significant differences were found in the use of open class metaphors in written discourse or the use of closed class metaphors in both oral and written production. Now, focusing on English language performance at B2 level, and regarding overall B2 performance, a statistically significant increase was found for both groups, yet neither group reached the B2 level proficiency at the end of the study. And regarding speaking performance, the experimental group, here I found a statistically significant evolution in speaking proficiency, including growth in the grammar and vocabulary descriptor. Regarding writing performance, both groups showed a statistically significant improvement in writing proficiency, including growth in language descriptor. And when comparing both groups, no statistically significant differences were found in oral and speaking performance at B2 level. And focusing on experimental group, a statistically significant progress was found in the grammar and vocabulary descriptor in the speaking compared to the control group. And regarding the control group, a statistically significant progress was found in writing compared to the experimental group, but not significant differences in written vocabulary production. To provide further insights into the impact of metaphor-mediated instruction on speaking performance, I examined metaphorical nouns, as these were the most frequent used open class metaphors in the spoken productions of both groups in the post-test. Specifically, the analysis focused on the topic of spending time outdoors. So here you can see the main findings. In examining writing, I focus on metaphorical verbs, one of the open class metaphors showing substantial differences between the groups in their essay when expressing views on future schools and the possibility of changes. So here again you can see the main findings and insights. Now, finally, regarding the last research question about the relationship between metaphor performance and assessment of English language performance at B2 level, here we can see regarding speaking a negative relationship non-significant between metaphor use and speaking proficiency. And regarding writing, a positive relationship was found but not significant between metaphor use and writing proficiency. And now, also regarding speaking, a positive relationship non-significant was found between metaphor use and spoken vocabulary, okay? And now, regarding written vocabulary production, a positive significant relationship was found between metaphor use and spoken vocabulary. So now, let's focus now on the discussion of these main findings. So regarding learning outcomes and metaphor performance, we can see certain benefits and limitations as you can see here. So I will just outline them. For example, enhanced metaphor use in oral discourse and written discourse, increased confidence in all learners for expressive purposes in real-life communication context, and support for consistent use of metaphors in speech and writing at the B2 level. However, also we can find some limitations. For example, this might not be a consequence of the teaching learning process. It could be influenced by discourse nature, task requirements and familiarity, highly frequent lexical items from textbook input, and the personal significance of topics. And also, we can say here that oral discourse requires explicit metaphor instruction, and there's a contrast with written discourse, which requires greater time and use of prefabricated expressions improvement. Now, focusing on the English language performance, again, we can see some benefits and limitations. Regarding the benefits, for example, we have enhanced exam success in high stakes ESOL examinations. Topic-related uses of metaphors at B2 level and beyond were found, particularly in written discourse, and metaphor serve as a topic facilitator in exam tasks. However, regarding limitations, we can say that writing proficiency improvement is not only, as you can see, it's not without solely relying on CL-inspired instruction. Topic-based metaphors do not automatically lead to improved oral and written skills, and prefabricated metaphorical expressions from task requirements and conventional metaphor use might play a key role in L2 learners' proficiency. And of course, assessment criteria impact is very important. We have a difference between precision in writing and fluency in speech. And regarding the teaching learning process, again, you can find here the benefits and limitations. For example, benefits: sustained effectiveness of CL-oriented distributed teaching of metaphor, judicious use of metaphor, and deeper vocabulary knowledge. However, limitations such as varying degrees of benefit, direct teaching, and corrective feedback are important in fine-tuning learners' metaphor use at this level. Effective metaphor use in foreign meaning requires more than heightened awareness according to the results. An exclusive focus on the conceptual dimension of metaphor may fall short in fostering conventional metaphorical use. And finally, regarding formal assessment, there is the link between metaphor use and assessment of English language proficiency. We can see that again we have differences between metaphor usage and exam success at B2 level, and also there is an assessment misalignment in standard L2 competency exams, as you can see here in this slide. So we have some implications. Just to conclude, the importance of weighting both statistical and pedagogical significance in pedagogically oriented metaphor research results is highlighted according to these findings. Also, we can find challenges in reconciling L2 learners' use of rigid formulaic linguistic metaphors with CL-inspired instruction. There's a need for greater focus on phraseological patterns in developing CL-inspired activities. Metaphor awareness may be seen as a double-edged sword for L2 learners in formal instruction, and the necessity for user-friendly guidelines on metaphor production in L2 learning that guide corrective feedback within the teaching learning process and for assessment criteria in a standard L2 competency exam is highlighted. And we need to teach metaphor with more balanced efforts, as you can see. Of course, this study has unanswered questions regarding the teaching learning process, in particular the role of input in metaphor using speech and writing, regarding the outcomes, the effect of metaphor-based instruction on metaphor-related skills, including individual level differences, and regarding finally formal assessment, ESL examiner's judgment of unconventional language use. So here you can access this code if you're interested in the study. It's in open access publication. And thank you for your time and your attention.